thing, except you're not given your equation in standard form. So the first thing that we want to do is put that equation into standard form so that we can identify those key characteristics afterwards. Shh, we're quiet now and we're paying attention, please. Okay, so for the first one, I have y equals x squared plus 6x plus 4. I want to put that in standard form, meaning I need to complete the square. Okay, so you need to complete the square first. So that means looking at your first two terms and factoring something out from both. Well, with this one, your a value is just 1. So you're technically just factoring out the 1 here. Right? So I have that quantity of those two terms. Now I want to complete the square for this quantity right here, meaning I need to add something onto that. Okay, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I have to add something on the left and on the right here. Okay, so I'm completing the square. Now to get what this is, that's where we take b over 2 squared. Okay, so our b value in this case is 6. So we have 6 over 2 squared. Okay, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So that means I'm adding 9 into this blank space right here. Okay, so I still have y equals 1 times x squared plus 6x. Now in that blank space, I am adding 9 plus 4. Now remember, to get this one over here, you have to multiply these two numbers together. Okay, you have to multiply those together to get this value here. Now since it's just a 1, it is still just going to be 9. Okay. So from here I can factor this quantity then, and it should factor into 2 of the same number. Okay, that's what completing the square does. So we have 9 plus y is equal to 1 times x plus 3 quantity squared plus 4. So all I did was factor that x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay, so what multiplies to 9 and adds to 6? 3 and 3. That's where that squared comes from, because it's that same number each time. So from here I still need y by itself. So we just need to subtract 9 from both sides to get y is equal to 1 times the quantity x plus 3 squared minus 5. Okay, and from here, we're doing the same thing we did yesterday. So use your standard form, okay, to find a, h, and k, and then use that to find your characteristics. Okay, so a in this case is just 1. Okay, so we have no stretch, no reflection, because it is just 1. Your h value, since this is in the form of y equals, h is on the inside of your parentheses, and you take the opposite of what it is. So negative 3. And k is on the outside, so that is negative 5. So moving your graph, this negative 3 will move it left 3 units. And this negative 5 will move it down 5. Okay, so next I still want to find these characteristics. So for our graph here, your vertex is still at HK. Okay, we found out what h was. It is -3 and k is -5. So that is where my vertex will be. Your axis of symmetry is at x is equal to h. Okay, so we have x is equal to -3 for that axis of symmetry. Your focus is at h, comma, k plus 1/4a. So our h value is -3. Our k value is -5 plus 1/4 times our a value is 1. And again, you can just enter that into your calculator. So -5 plus 1/4. So we have -3 and -4.75 for our focus. Okay, last one is the directrix. Directrix is in the form y equals k minus 1/4a. Again, we just have to plug that in. So plug in your value for k. That's -5 minus 1/4 times our a value is 1. So we have -5 minus 1/4. So y is equal to -5.25. And again, just like yesterday, we can make that table of values to plot our points and graph this parabola. Okay, so we have our XY chart here. Our vertex should go in the middle. Okay, so we have -3, -5, and we want to surround that vertex. Okay, so points that surround that vertex on your x side here. So we'll go down to -4 and -5, and then up -2 and -1. Okay, so just surrounding that vertex point. So all we want to do is plug in -5 into our standard form. Okay, so if I plug in -5, I do get -2 squared. That is 4. Okay, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 minus 5 is -1. Okay, plug in -4. I get -1. -1 squared is +1. So I have 1 times 1, which is 1, minus 5 is -4. Now, since I surrounded that vertex, these other two numbers should follow suit with those two. So if I plug in -2, okay, I get 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Minus 5 is -4. Okay, same thing with -1. If I plug it in, I should get -1. So from here, I can just plot these points on my graph. Okay, so I have a point of -5, -1. I have -4, -4. I have -3, -5. -2, -4, and -1, -1. Okay, so here's my parabola. And you can see that the parabola did move left 3 units from the origin and down 5. Okay, so that's where that vertex comes from. It moved left 3 and down 5 on that graph. Okay, questions on the first one? Do you need to see anything below the graph? Does anybody need to see the characteristics on the bottom here in this chart? Do we get them all down? Or the XY table? You good? All right. Then we're going to do one more example. Okay, so one more example here. We have 3x minus y squared equals 4x plus 5. Okay, so I need to look for which one of my variables is squared. Okay, that is y right here. So that means this equation should be in the form of x equals something. Okay, so whatever value you have squared, it's the other one that's the one that equals. So that means I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides here because I want my x's together. So I have negative y squared is equal to x plus 5. And I do want x by itself because I want this as an x equals equation. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I have negative y squared minus 5 is equal to x. So just like before, I need to take my numbers that have a variable in them and I need to factor out. Okay, so that's just this one right here. I don't have a number with y. I just have a y squared. Okay, so I need to factor something out of this y squared. It's just negative 1. So I have negative 1 times y squared minus 5 is equal to x. Now, that y squared, since I don't have like a 2y or a negative 2y or anything like that attached to it, it's 0y. So when that happens, you can just change this right away to y minus 0 squared. Okay, so if you don't have that second y value or that second x value if you're in the other form, you can just change it to minus 0 and that quantity squared right away. You still have the negative 1 out front and the minus 5 after. But this is your standard form. So with this one, you didn't even have to complete the square. So again, if you don't have that extra y variable, you can just move right away to that variable minus 0. So now using this standard form, I can find a, h, and k. So a is the number out front. That is negative 1. Okay, that negative 1 is going to reflect your graph and in the y-axis in this case, since it is an x equals equation. Our h value is the value outside of the parentheses now. When you have an x equals equation, your h and k values switch. So k is on the outside. So that is negative 5. Okay, that means your graph is moving left 5 units. And then your k value is the value inside of your parentheses. Okay, so our k value here is 0. So it's not going to move up or down. Okay, it's not going to move up or down. So now I can find the vertex, okay, for this type of graph. Since it's an x equals, it's going to either open left or right. And your vertex is still at hk. And I already found what h and k are. So h is negative 5 and k is 0. So that is my vertex. Your axis of symmetry for an x equals graph is y equals k. So our axis of symmetry is at y equals 0 since k was 0. Your focus is at h I gotta remember this, h plus, yep, h plus 1 over 4a, okay? Okay, our h value is -5, and our a value is -1, and our k is 0. So you're just plugging in those values I had you label up here. Okay, so I have -5 plus -1/4 is -5.25, and we keep 0 the same. I'm going to move this up a little bit so you can see it. The last characteristic here is the directrix. Okay, for an x equals equation, your directrix is in x equals h minus 1 over 4a. So we have x equals, our h value is -5 minus 1 over 4 times -1. So we have -5 minus a -1/4. So x will equal -4.75 for that directrix. Okay, so now we have all those characteristics. Now we can just make that XY chart off to the side here. Now remember, with this type of equation, you still put your vertex in the middle. So our vertex is at -5, 0, but you need to fill in your y values for an x equals equation. So we need to surround the y values here. Okay, so that means I have -1 and -2, +1 and +2. Okay, so you have to surround the y values for this type of equation. So I can plug in -2 for y. Okay, so if I have -2 squared, that's 4. 4 times -1 is -4, minus 5 is -9. Okay, same thing with -1. -1 squared is +1. Times -1 makes it negative. Okay, so -1 minus 5 is -6. And again, since I surrounded that vertex, your other two numbers should be reflected over that. So if I plug in 1, I should have -6, and 2, I should get -9. So from there, all you have to do is plot those points on your graph. So my graph is over here. So I have -9, -2, -6, -1, -5, 0, -6, +1, -9, +2. So I should be opening to the left. Okay, questions on this problem here?